Welcome to Lawyer Up with HMC, where we unravel the complexities of legal battles, share insights into high-stakes litigation, and provide strategies for navigating the legal landscape. Join us as we delve into and discuss common legal issues and interview industry professionals and experts in the field. Whether you're a legal professional, a business owner, or simply curious about the world of litigation, our podcast offers valuable knowledge and practical advice to empower you in your legal journey. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, hmclawyers.com. Now here's the host of the Lawyer Up with HMC podcast, Kristen Hagg.
Hey everyone, welcome to Lawyer Up with HMC. I'm your host, Kristen Hagg. In today's episode, we're doing something entirely different than we've done so far this season. While we always try to bring some levity to the law here at HMC, the topics have ultimately been pretty serious and even heavy at times. So we're going to call this episode The Lighter Side of the Law, or perhaps we could call it Lawyer Up and Laugh. At least we're hoping that everybody can get a good laugh out of this one. I have two guests joining me today. The first guest I will introduce is really more of a co-host, as it was he that came up with this topic. Patrick, or as his friends call him, Pat Clark, is a partner here at HMC. Pat is a civil litigator focusing on construction law, professional liability, commercial insurance, personal injury, and other insurance-related disputes. Pat also has a background working in the construction industry, which serves as a huge asset as he assists clients with negotiation and litigation of construction-related disputes, contract drafting and review, builders' liens, debt collection, and regulatory issues arising out of the Occupational Health and Safety Act and Safety Codes Act. He also really enjoys a good laugh. Welcome, Pat.
Well, thank you very much, Kristen. I mean, that sounds really good when somebody reads it out like that. Somebody really good must have written that little intro that you had there. Anyway, we've got with us Tim, or as we affectionately call him around here, Unky Tim Hagg, who's just, one of the funniest guys around. So when I came up with this idea for maybe having a little bit of a joke podcast here, he was the obvious choice. So Timothy C. Hagg is a professional engineer and distinguished lawyer. And he's also an Alberta boy through and through because he's lived in Red Deer, Edmonton, and Calgary. So he's got it all. He was a founding partner at HMC Lawyers and then moved on to a sole proprietor role, which I assume means working out of his home office in his pajamas and, basically being nagged by his wife constantly. Tim's website says his practice focuses primarily on casualty claims, coverage opinions, and design professionals' errors and omissions. And it also contains one of my very favorite legal headshots of all time with Tim smashing or flashing his $1 million smile. So I'm sure it'll be up on the logo for this podcast here, but you should check it out. He's also a great friend and mentor of mine and, Kristen's uncle. I wanted to get Tim on here because he is an absolute legend in the Alberta legal community when it comes to telling jokes and his sense of humor. He's also a good lawyer, and some people might respect him for that too. But mostly it's the sense of humor. We wanted to talk about the lighter side of the law here to showcase that, a lot of lawyers are very serious people, and a lot of lawyers think themselves very serious people. But there is a lighter side of the profession generally, and there's lots of really, really good, honest, down-to-earth, and funny members of the bar. So, despite the intro there of the general nature of this podcast, like Kristen said, we're going to do something entirely different. And we're going to tell some jokes, and we're going to tell some stories. And this is why we've got Tim here, because he is one of the great storytellers of all time, as far as I'm concerned. So this business is rife with interesting characters, high-pressure moments, and it can take some folks for a loop when they're involved in it. And we've all got stories about this. Someone's gone off the deep end, some clients, some opposing counsel. Kristen and I might have a couple, not as many as Tim. And, we probably can't say all of them. But Tim's been practicing since the Dead Sea was just a little sick. So he's got all sorts of stories. Right, Kristen?
Yeah, well, and I do want to just say, welcome, Tim. You can speak now. Sorry, we've been holding you in suspense there for a little bit. Any opening remarks before we get started?
I will have a hard time living up to that billing as one of the funniest guys around, that's for sure. But I do like a good joke, and it's funny once you get to be a little bit of a joke teller. Sometimes then that attracts other material from other people. So I've been a benefit of that, and I haven't made up any of the jokes that we might tell today, but I've sure been on the front row for some of these anecdotes. And Pat, you're right, is that this business seems to breed strange characters, and not just amongst the lawyers, of which there are many very strange ones, but we run into people who are either clients or witnesses or judges who are pretty colorful characters. And it is a welcome thing when something very funny happens in the course of the law, because it just helps break up the, fairly serious day-to-day grind. So.
Yeah, I think that's a great comment, because I feel like, we go out for lunches together and things like that. And sure, we talk about the work we're doing or whatever, but I think more so we just kind of, we like to, shoot jokes around, tell funny stories. It's nice to kind of get away from the, the harder grindy stuff. But sorry, Tim, you did a sound check earlier and camera check this week, didn't you?
You
might need to zoom out a bit. Your head's
I have no ability to zoom or to do any of those kind of things.
Your head's taken up the entire screen. No, I'm just saying. Really? So anyone that tuned into this by audio only may think this is a joke about the size of Tim's ego. It's not. I'm speaking of his literal head size. And I do have to say that I have to clarify that Dave Corrigan, KC, put me up to that. So don't worry to our showrunner. That was just a joke. His sound is great.
So I don't have to mess around with my settings. Is that what you're saying?
No, you're good. You're good.
No,
I was told I had to make a head joke. Yeah. But you don't have too big of an ego, just your literal head size.
Oh, well, thank you.
I didn't.
No, honestly, Tim, you are one of my favorite Hags to joke around with, so I'm really glad that you're here. So.
Okay, well, that's great.
I might have been supposed to have introduced you as Tim Bisonhead Hagg, but I thought maybe that was that joke's a little bit.
If the gloves are truly off, I'm at least here to defend myself, and Corrigan isn't. But I've got all kinds of things I could say about him. That little sawed-off shrimp. But anyway.
I know. Okay, well, we're sorry. We didn't bring you here to ambush you. We truly do want to hear your stories, because they really are some of the best ones around. So I'm going to flip it back to Pat to sort of tee that up. I think he's ready to do that.
Sure. And so I think we've got sort of two modes to this thing, and we're going to do some anecdotes. And once we're through the Tim regaling us with the fine tales of comic yore, which he's going to discuss a little bit here, and Kristen and I have one or two. We're going to talk about a lawyer joke. We're going to talk about the idea of the lawyer joke, and we're going to tell some lawyer jokes. So with that, I think I'm going to throw it to Tim for what might be one of his favorite anecdotes in this business.
Yeah, well, this one is about when I was a very young lawyer. So this was pushing 4 decades ago, when I was in one of my very first trials. And as any young lawyer can tell you, when you're in your first few trials, you're scared to death the whole time. It's a pretty high stress thing, and you do probably over too much preparation for it, and you're in there. But any event, so in this trial, I was up against, I was defending a case, and my opponent, there was just one other party, was a very senior, wily guy who'd got a pretty deep bag of tricks. But in any event, I was doing my closing argument. Now, during closing argument, the rules are pretty clear, is that your opponent is not supposed to interrupt you. He's supposed to sit there silently and wait until you're completely finished. Then he has his turn to rebut anything you're going to say. In any event, I was doing my closing in this case, and I was working myself up into a crescendo there, trying to keep the judge's attention. And and get going. And all of a sudden my opponent stands up and says, "Wait, my lord, wait, stop. There's something very important I have to share with my friend." Now, this is very unusual. The judge sits up and says, "Oh, of course, sir, please, whatever it is." And so the other lawyer, he reached into his pocket and he came over to me and he handed me this card. And it was a pre-printed card. He obviously has a great many of these, but it simply said on there, "Age and treachery will overcome youth and skill." Now, this was completely, beyond the pale to do this. And I had no idea how to react to it. I was just completely taken aback. And the judge as well, "Mr. Hagg, is it, I didn't know quite what to do. But anyway, he succeeded in throwing me off and probably helped his case in the process. There's other crazy things that go on, even with witnesses. I can remember
Well, can I stop you, Tim? Sorry, I want to ask about that again. So
yeah, sure.
You did nothing. You just continued on with your closing.
I was just dumbfounded because the judge, who was a fellow who's been gone for many years now, it was Ernie Marshall, and he says, "Well, Mr. Hagg, what is it?" I just had nothing to say. I just said, "No, my lord, I'll just continue." But then I had to regather my thoughts, kind of figure out where I was, and try to put something
Did you
together.
blow it? Like, was that it? Did it completely, ruin the case? Did you? How
No,
did it turn out?
well, it was like so many of these cases. The result was kind of like the judge likes to split the baby,
Split the baby, yeah.
Give each side a little bit of something. So it was fine. Nobody got reported to the Law Society or anything. So.
Right, but you're a junior lawyer. You don't know what to do about this thing. But let's think, like, if you had told the judge what he'd done, what do you think would have happened? Do you think, if you had a judge there that had a good sense of humor, he'd say,
"Yeah, no, we had
highly inappropriate." But hey,
I can assure you that I could name any number of judges who, if I'd told them what had happened, they would have not been amused, with what my opponent had done. But I think my friend there, he knew that, Justice Marshall was a pretty lighthearted guy, and it worked out fine, so.
Yeah, he probably would pick and choose his spots on that. Like, seems like a smart guy. But my follow-up question to that is, so you were junior then. What about as you got more senior? Did you ever do anything even remotely like that to a junior lawyer?
I wouldn't, because I am kind of having been brought up under the tutelage of a couple of very traditional, strict guys. I've always tried to stick with the proper, more conservative approach to things. In other words, your dad would kill me if he knew I'd done something like that.
I was going to say another large-headed Hagg would come at you.
Yes, another one. But also, I was articled to Bill Wilson, who was an extremely conservative guy, the gold medalist in his class, became a judge, and he was just Mr. Straight and Narrow about every single thing. So I wouldn't have wanted that to get back to him, that's for sure.
Yeah, so you reserved all of your antics for in the office with your work colleagues, not your opponents.
I wasn't much for antics early on.
True. That's what I mean. Once you got more senior.
Well, it was a different time, and when you're very junior, you're kind of cowed and not really. Mm-hmm. Your personality becomes more developed when I think you become more secure in your position at the firm.
Yeah, for sure. So, fair.
Yeah.
Well, I think that story ties in pretty well to the jokes we'll be telling later. This is the kind of person, I think, who handed you that card. Also had a pre-printed card. Like, this isn't just something he scribbled down on a Post-it note and handed over.
No. He was well prepared.
That wasn't handwritten?
No. This was printed like your business card. Big. So the card is this big, and the letters were half an inch high. Like, so you could,
Well, kudos to him.
Yeah. Well, he was a very strange fellow, because he'd come to court, he looked like he'd jogged in or something, or ridden his bike in his gown, because it's all covered in dirt, and he was wearing what do you call those those rubber shoes you wear in the garden?
Duck shoes.
Yeah, he's wearing duck shoes and big woolen socks that
Crocs.
are hanging out and everything. So he wasn't much for all the niceties, that's for sure.
Gotcha.
Crocs
Okay, well,
to
we didn't mean
court.
to
That's something else.
sidetrack you there. You were getting into another
No,
story.
well, there was another one, so there's a procedure that we do that we now call questioning. It used to be called examinations for discovery, where it's like if you watch American TV, people would know this is a deposition, right? So the lawyers are asking the other side questions in a lawyer's office, but it's under oath and it's a serious thing. And emotions can run pretty high sometimes because people have a lot at stake. But and you run into all kinds of folks, like different witnesses. Some people are just very straightforward. Others are, a little more hostile. Some are maybe they don't always necessarily tell the God's honest truth every time their mouth opens. So you have to be kind of prepared for different kinds of people. But I can remember once, this is just a few years ago now, I was examining a woman under oath, and it was a very fractious thing. Like everything was very unpleasant. This woman, if I asked her to agree that the sun came up in the east that morning, she wouldn't agree with that. Right? Like everything was a battle. And anyway, it went along, and it was all very difficult, but it was concluded. I close up the books, and I'm sitting there, and the witness leaves. This is at our office, and anyway, our receptionist came in, and it's part of her job to straighten up the place when you're done. And she looks where this woman was sitting, and she screams, and there was actually a puddle of urine sitting in the leather chair there where this woman had been examining her. So I guess she was fully involved, you could say, in the event. So I don't know whether I scared it out of her, or this was some kind of a bladder control issue that was of long standing, or what it was.
Oh, I think she left that just for you, Tim. That was
It probably was. Oh, you meant it
retribution.
it was a present, right?
Hey, it depends. No? Okay, I tried a joke.
No.
I really did. It depends.
I got it. I got it. I may be in my dotage, Kristen, but
yeah.
See,
that just makes me think of Seinfeld. Poppy got a little sloppy.
Yeah, Poppy got sloppy. Yeah. Now,
Oh,
Kristen,
yeah.
I know that many people are far too young to know anything about Seinfeld.
Oh, trust me, I know this because I tried to make a joke one time about the Clams Casino, and a bunch of younger people than me. It was just crickets. It was awful. The Clams Casino. Anyways, let's move on. This is not a Seinfeld joke.
Well, I assume you've made a Seinfeld reference on every one of these podcasts so far, haven't you, Kristen? No?
I really should have. Now that I'm thinking back, now we have to do a second season because that has to be the common theme of every single episode. Squeeze in a Seinfeld joke. I do try to squeeze a Seinfeld joke into every single day.
Well, 100%. I can attest to that. Could we go back and fill them in? Can we get everybody to come back and fill one in?
I'll watch them, and I'll see if there's a good opportunity for it.
Hmm.
All right, Tim, who's next?
Well, again, at a discovery, this wasn't one I was at personally, but there was a transcript of the discovery, and this would have been, this is forever ago, 40 years ago. And this was back when we were still up at the office in Edmonton. But there's a transcript of a gentleman who's being examined on his personal injury case. So he was hurt, and he's trying to get money for that. And of course, the lawyer for the defense wants to ask a bunch of questions. And one of the very standard questions you would ask somebody early in this kind of a thing is you'd ask them to produce their income tax records so you could have some proof of how much money they made. But anyway, this transcript, when you read this, here's this gentleman. I don't think I should use his name. I'll just call him Mr. Smith. But Mr. Smith was asked to produce his income tax records. And you have to understand, for context, this is like page 7, which is, just a few minutes into the questioning. And then all of a sudden the guy says, and he jumps up, says, "This effer is saying too effing much." This is right on the transcript. And then you can hear his lawyer say, "For God's sakes, John, sit down." And then the lawyer who's asking the questions, this is right on the transcript, yells, "Help!" and and there was obviously a bunch of things going on, and a melee ensued, and call the police and all this kind of stuff. So crazy stuff happens. As luck would have it, I knew the court reporter, who's the lady who creates the transcript, and I asked her about it later, and she said she was completely terrified. This guy went berserk, like he launched himself right across the table, had the other lawyer by the neck, and was banging his head on the ground, before they were ultimately separated. So emotions do run high.
And she just kept typing.
And she just kept typing because she didn't know what else to. She was scared of the guy, right? So eventually it broke up, and then the guy, I think his last words as he exited the words, I think I've still got the transcript here somewhere, but he basically said, "You effing puke." Is just describing the defense lawyer, which might be a common attitude amongst plaintiffs. I don't know, but in any event, that's how that went. So,
well, I think that the Madam Reporter there was really dedicated to her craft, to just keep going through that whole thing.
Yeah, well,
and to me, that illustrates why it is so important to be descriptive on the record, because if it's just actions, I mean, it leaves people reading the transcript to have to imagine what's going on. I think in a story like that, it is better that you could imagine what was going on, because that's hilarious. But just illustrative of why, you can't just make gestures, nod your head, shake your head, gotta be able to see what's happening, know what's happening.
Yeah. I have a couple of very short little anecdotes about judges who, of course, we respect and everything, but are unusual things. Just there was one judge in Edmonton for years. He's now long since retired, but he was famous for having been armed every time he entered the court. He actually came into court with a pistol under his robes. I know this is an awful long time ago, so maybe the rules about carry are different now. I'm sure they are than they would have been at the time.
Was that Texas? Like, I just still don't see it.
Well, he had a nickname that, I won't say who it was, because then, who knows if the estate can still sue me or not. But there was another judge in Edmonton who was a very scary guy. He was a big, imposing guy, and he had this deep voice, and he just did not suffer fools gladly and didn't like the criminal defendants very much. And he was famous for what he'd do is, after all the evidence and argument is heard, when he's going to give his decision, then he would look over at the accused, who's sitting there in the prisoner's box, and he'd stare him down. Before he said a word about what he's going to do with the verdict, he'd just stare him down and he'd say, "Stand up, convict." Right, there's the first words out of his mouth, and then he would give all the reasons why the guy was guilty, which was mostly the case in his courtroom. Right, but I just can't even imagine how frightened you'd be if you were, sitting there listening to that. So,
well, it does sort of tip his hand a little bit when he starts with "stand up, convict."
Well,
I probably don't need to wait to the end of the decision, right? Like,
you really do not. I think.
Well,
I think as time's gone on, I think, in fairness, I think judges have become less colorful. Now, I don't know whether there's something about the Judicial Council or the briefing they give them now that encourages them to be less flamboyant than they once were. But for the most part, now when you're in court, judges are pretty reserved up there and don't say as much as they would have perhaps in the past. So.
Well, you know what? That brings up a point, that whole stand-up convict thing. And I had an oral decision read to me, a couple of times. But you sit there, especially if somebody's giving you a rather long oral decision, and you find yourself in this roller coaster, right? Like, often, I've never had anyone give me an oral decision with the first sentence that they tell you is what they decided, right? They always leave that to the end.
They bury the lead.
20 minutes. Right?
Yeah. They bury the lead, as they would say. Yeah.
And they tell your position, and then the opposing position, and you're like, oh, geez, both of these sound really good, when they put it like that. But I don't know which way you're going to go yet. That's the roller coaster of the oral decision. You can't skip to the end and just see what the decision is first.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I think any lawyer that's had an oral decision has been through that. Yeah, when you get the written decision, you just scroll straight down to the bottom or flip to the end, and you look at the outcome, and then or yay, or whatever. But yeah, it needs to be like that movie Click, where you fast forward to the end. And you're like, okay, well, maybe if it's a good outcome, I guess I want to listen to it.
So,
I guess bad. You should
Kristen, I didn't know you were a secret Adam Sandler fan.
It's no secret.
Oh yeah, Happy Gilmore, Billy Madison,
All the greats.
all the greats.
Big Daddy.
Well, for my time, Big Daddy. Yeah, that one, that's a little lower on the scale. I don't think there's a few of his that I've never seen, but he's made a lot of good movies. He's more or less the exact same person in every movie, but he's a funny guy, so why not? I like keeping it light all the time. So, well, Pat, what about you? You got any stories?
Well, you and I talked about this morning, and this isn't me. This is something I heard of. And certainly won't name any names here, but if anyone who's involved does ever listen to this thing, they'll know what I'm talking about. But there's we get into disputes, and not everybody in this business is easy to deal with, so to speak. So this particular dispute was, I can't remember. It was not a significant, big dispute. It was sort of a middle of the road thing. But anyway, they were having a fight about something, the lawyers and the clients, and it required a court appearance. And the, we'll call it the, I think in this case it was the plaintiff's counsel. But anyway, one of the lawyers was thinking, maybe he didn't actually want to attend that court appearance. It seemed it wasn't going to go good for him, or he wanted to get a little bit more time to prepare. And he ended up sending down I think it was an articling student from his firm to say that he had an emergency medical procedure that was came up on him suddenly. He didn't know it was coming, and they're going to have to adjourn this particular appearance. So, the other lawyer didn't exactly believe that maybe this was the case. So a plan was hatched to deliver some flowers by way of process server to the office as just a goodwill gesture to say, I hope your procedure went well, and then get an affidavit of service indicating that lawyer was there. And that's basically exactly how it went. And, I don't believe that anything else happened about that other than some folks might have had a laugh about it, but, there are many ways to deal with these things, and sometimes have a little fun with it in the process.
Well, I think everybody's been doing this for a while. You have times when you've been in court and it's going sideways on you, right? And it isn't good. And it can just be the most desperate, terrible feeling in the world. I do have an unapproved anecdote, though. I could
fire away.
I can remember several years ago, I was in the Court of Appeal, and there was I was on a panel of all the respondents, and there were 5 different lawyers there. We were all pretty senior, and the appellant was a junior lawyer who's obviously never been in the Court of Appeal before. Now, you want to talk about high pressure. The Court of Appeal is pretty much it, because you've got 3 judges up there who are all taking turns asking you questions. And while one is stumping you with a difficult question, the other 2 are loading up, trying to make your life miserable with the next 2 questions. And it's a difficult spot to be in. But in any event, this young lawyer had been thrown into the lion's den. It wasn't even his case. It was Norm Mashida's case. So this is one of Norm Mashida's juniors. He was off in Mexico.
You're okay to just throw that name
I'll
out.
talk about Norm. But anyway, so this poor guy, I'll just call him, we'll make the name, call him Matthew. So there's Matthew, and he is just, it was not a good appeal. Like they're just taking a flyer on this. And Matt was just taking it on the chin, like boom, 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 as the appellant, because they go first. And this poor guy, like everybody, the other lawyers, we're all overlooking, we're kind of looking down like this. We can't even watch. Like, it's just so awful. And so anyway, one of the judges eventually said, Matthew, Would you like a few minutes to gather your thoughts before you continue? And he would have done anything. Like he wanted to pull a lever and go through a trapdoor. He said, yes, please give me some time. So anyway, you stand up, right, as the lawyers, while the judges file out. And the second they went out and the door closed behind them, I don't think they realized that it isn't completely soundproof back there. Because then you could hear one of them, you couldn't hear the words, but you could hear the muffling, like, and then the other two laugh. Then one of the other voices, and then the other two, and this poor guy sitting there, so in the break, he's trying to get Normashita by phone in Mexico, who's lying there on the beach somewhere. What the heck am I going to do? It didn't get any better from there. Let's just say. So my empathy went out to that young fella at the time. He's still practicing, like we all still know him. He's around, but oh my gosh, I can't even imagine, how bad that must have been.
And so you successfully opposed that appeal?
The judges did not ask to hear from the respondents. They just dismissed the case without reasons. No, that's the worst of all possible results, right? If you're the appellant, because they don't even need to hear from the other side.
Well, I'm sure that still practicing lawyer will be super happy to hear this story is still floating around out there.
Well, anyway, it was tough. A tough day at the office. He earned his money then. We charge by the hour, but I've always thought, boy, if you're in the court of appeal, you ought to be able to charge triple or quadruple or something, because it takes years off your life every hour you're in there. So.
Well, I'm sure that there's a whole industry that does just that.
Especially now that the Court of Appeal, it looks like you're like in space. Like it looks like space court. Like that Court of Appeal, like it's so white and cold and unwelcoming.
It's I don't know if it's like supposed to be like purgatory or something like that, but when you're in there, it's not great. We used to have this great old, the old sandstone courthouse there.
That's still there.
Yeah.
I have a picture of it on my wall. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's been boarded up for years because they've got mold in there apparently, which is too bad. But
asbestos maybe. Well, yeah. I do have one of my own stories, and it also ties into questioning. It's only ever been questioning since I've been practicing, but practicing a decent amount in personal injury law, every now and then we use surveillance, and it is, for as much as we use surveillance, it's pretty rare to get good surveillance. But sometimes you'll get somebody building a fence on their weekend or carrying heavy bags of cement. And on this occasion, I got nothing like that. But the investigator discovered that the plaintiff, a relatively young lady, was running an escort business while alleging to be unable to work. And so I had to show this to other people in the office, and I can bring up, I'll just refer to him as the partner that mentored me. To him, as a little bit of background, details of cases, the more salacious, the better. This just gets him really fired up, right? Like he just loves when cases have salacious details. And he was like, you have to put
nobody around will know who we're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't care about this one. He can sue me if he wants. So he's not going to listen to this. He doesn't even know how to put your headphones in.
He's listening right now through the wall.
I can actually hear him too. But anyway, so he said I had to put this to the witness in questioning. Like, you've got to do it. And I was still young enough and junior enough that I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And the lawyer on the other side, plaintiff counsel, super nice guy, like somebody I, have always gotten along really well with. And he's sitting there in this questioning, like done it a million times before, just like waiting for it to be done, like looking at his watch. And then I was like, I'd like to show you something. And I throw this thing up on the table, and it's got a bunch of pretty risque photos in there. He just all of a sudden, like the look on his face, he all of a sudden popped up in his chair. His eyes just like bulged out of his head, pushed his glasses back up his nose. Like he just looked like he wanted to die. I made him way more uncomfortable than the witness. She actually followed up and answered all my questions. Anyways, we settled the case a couple days later. It was, it worked out great.
Alleging a TMJ injury? I just wanting to know. I think for context, that's important, Kristen.
It is, yes. Well, this brings up a really, really important point, and it kind of ties in with the whole joke thing. I mean, when you find something out like that, like Kristen's job as an advocate for her client is to ask those tough questions. Every single one. You can't, it's no holds barred when you get to that. And that sort of leads into the whole basis of a lot of these lawyer jokes, that lawyers are heartless and, all of this sort of stuff, because the nature of our job as an advocate in what justice, as we have seen it, and, since the Magna Carta basically, is based on an adversarial system. And, sometimes that means you have to do difficult things. And if you find out information like that about a particular witness that they're not sharing, part of their income stream, obviously that has an impact on the quantum of the claim. You got to ask those questions.
I've been doing it for fun. I don't know.
Well, I guess, yeah.
Well, I think that it'd be, you'd be lying if you didn't say you didn't look forward to asking those questions.
It's true. I mean, and I still have this story, however long later. All the other questionings were pretty dull, and I've forgotten about them. So,
Well,
okay.
Well, it wasn't salacious, but I had a case once. This is back years and years ago when I defended Sornek cases. But early on, it was a female plaintiff, and one of the allegations that was in black and white in the statement of claim was because of her sore neck, she'd gained a couple pounds, and that was the reason why she wasn't a Playmate of the Month for Mr. Hefner. That's true story. So I had to ask her all the questions about that, and she told the whole story about the year before she'd gone down for the photo shoot, and they said, "Well, you're real close. You just have to, just work on this or that little thing." And then the accident happened, and of course, nothing. She never had her chance, I guess. But the word got around the office that this woman was going to be in there, and she had certain attributes. And so I remember when we came out for the coffee break, halfway through the morning, every single young male lawyer in the office was sitting in the waiting room purporting to read a magazine or the paper, just so they could get a look at this woman. So we settled
sounds
that.
about right. Speaking of lawyer stereotypes, but yeah, it's Pat. Let's get these jokes going. Let's go.
Okay, so I've always really liked lawyer jokes. I'm a fan of them. My parents had a lawyer friend in Edmonton when I was a kid, and he told a lot of lawyer jokes. The favorite one I still remember him telling is, what's the difference between a catfish and a lawyer? One's a scum-sucking bottom dweller and the other's a fish, right? And that's, with good delivery, and that's a classic comedic approach with the sort of bait and switch there. But it also illustrates what some folks might think is offensive about this. And I was looking up, doing some research for this, and I did find a very well-written blog by an American lawyer from 2008 or so. And this guy hates lawyer jokes. And I just want to read a couple things about what he said about a lawyer joke. Then we'll disagree with him and we'll tell some lawyer jokes. He goes, "My problem with lawyer jokes is that they're abusive. Good humor turns on incongruity or unexpected developments," which is just what that catfish joke does. But the humor in most lawyer jokes, such as it is, turns on the inscrutable nature of the lawyer. To the extent he speaks or acts in the joke, the lawyer is greedy, dishonest, stupid, destructively selfish, amoral, and nihilistic. And my response to that is, that's what makes it funny. Anyway, he says this, and the whole blog is about, he's particularly offended when a lawyer tells a lawyer joke, which again, I disagree. I'm in big trouble then. Well, me too. He goes, "When a lawyer tells a lawyer joke, he often defends it in one of two ways. First, he says he's simply trying to put clients at ease. I don't know if I tell many lawyer jokes with clients, but anyway. Well, when was the last time your doctor told you a joke about an arrogant, self-absorbed doctor whose patients are nothing but meat to him? Or your auto mechanic told you the one about the crooked mechanic who rips off his customers and uses cheap counterfeit parts to fix their cars? Or your accountant said that 10,000 accountants at the bottom of the ocean is a good start. And if any of these service providers..."
That's a lawyer joke. That's not.
I know, that's the point of his little thing here. He's, that's the literary, trick. He goes, "Would it put you more at ease, or would you have serious doubts about their professionalism and reliability? Listen, if I was going in to get some surgery done and the surgeon talked about, told a joke about me being the piece of meat, I would feel better about it, to be honest with you. I disagree with this guy. And I also make those sorts of jokes with my mechanic all the time too, right? You go in there, you tell him about how crooked he is. He has a good laugh. He says, for sure. And then, you hope at the end of the day he isn't. But, you ever tried to make a joke with an accountant? Doesn't go anywhere.
The accountants just aren't funny. But
yeah, I agree. Anyway, that's one thing about this. I disagree. I think, the lawyer jokes are good. They're fun. I mean, they are a stereotype joke that, I have no problem with, but that's fine. I like the cheap shot artistry, and I like, that's just kind of the joke I like. So anyway, do you have any opposing point of view, Tim, or a comment on that?
Well, I think you're always kind of, I think there's a danger sometimes in telling too many stereotype jokes, depending upon the circumstance and the stereotype of the category of person you're talking about. But let's face it, stereotypes aren't invented for no reason. There's at least somebody who's had an experience in the past with a lawyer that would make any number of lawyers who'd make all this come true. Now the truth is, so many of the lawyer jokes describe behavior that if we ever got caught doing it, we'd be disbarred. But
that's right.
But if you can't laugh at yourself, right, or kind of take them for what they are, okay, they're not intended as a direct slight, on your character. But I know lots of folks who, I know one person in particular who is similar to the author there, who's happens to be my brother and your dad, Kristen. He's not the biggest supporter of lawyer jokes, but that's the same guy. Okay, you talk about, somebody comes into the office just at the wrong time. I remember I was lying in a hospital bed once, just going in for surgery, and my brother was standing there telling me jokes about things that had gone wrong in surgery. So,
well,
I think maybe he does protest too much, maybe, right? And this
well, the anecdotes that we just told, and I tried to sort of relate back to the joke. I mean, these sort of bring up the fact that, yeah, you know what? All of us in this business, I think, are sort of well situated to tell lawyer jokes, because we all have run into people that would, personify some of these things. But anyway, I'm going to tell a joke. We'll maybe talk about it a little bit, what we like about it, what we don't, and then, that'll be about it. So I found this one particular, and I know Tim's going to like this one. Okay. So an engineer dies and he goes to heaven. Okay. He's stopped by St. Peter at the gate, and St. Peter says, no, you got to go down to hell. I'm sorry. So he goes down to hell, and within a couple of months, they've got escalators, they've got bridges across the lava, they got jacuzzis everywhere, and everyone's just having a great time. Now, God hears about this, and he gives Satan a call, and he says, hey, Satan, I hear you got an engineer down there. They're supposed to be up here. Satan replies, hey, listen, your boy St. Peter sent this guy down here, and I'm not sending him back up. He's a great asset. Things have really turned around down here. We could really appreciate keeping him around. And God says, you know what? That's it. I'm going to have to sue you, and we're going to have to send this thing back up. And Satan replies, where are you going to get a lawyer?
Yes.
Huh? I don't like the hell lawyer joke. Like, I don't think that's the best sort of theme. And it's a big one, right? We're all bad people. We're all going to hell. But it did have an engineer in it. So that one's for you too.
Well, as being a former engineer, also that, there's we're not here to tell engineer jokes. There's lots of good ones there, but mainly they're about their inability to get women. But anyway,
but they can sure build an escalator in hell. That's
right. Yeah. In hell. Okay, now. Oh, you go ahead, Tim.
No, go. If you were still on this joke, I'm.
No. I was going to move on to the next joke. Or if you got a joke, go
ahead.
I
have one that we can squeeze in at some point there.
Well, go for it.
All right. Well, this one is about a problem a lawyer had. He'd just finished drafting up a will for a sweet old lady, and he sent her a bill for $100. And the very next day, he gets an envelope in the mail. He opens it up, and there's this beautiful handwritten note from the sweet old lady, and there's a $100 bill in there. And the lawyer pulls the bill out. It turns out it's this crisp new bill. It's actually two bills stuck together. So he's got $200 there. But now the lawyer's faced with this terrible moral dilemma. Does he tell his partners about the extra $100? Sorry.
And because it might have been a mistake from the lady.
You see, but that one's kind of double-headed. Not only is he going to do the wrong thing with the sweet old lady, he's actually
that's a given.
Yeah, that's a given, right? That's a given. But is he actually going to screw over his partners as well? So
absolutely.
Absolutely.
See, that one's a little lesser known than the hell joke. So
totally.
That one's really good. I'd never heard that one before, actually. I had to. I don't go around telling these jokes. I had to look a couple up online, honestly, and there were a couple. I can't do these long, drawn out jokes. Pat, you guys are both very good at putting these out, but I have one here for you, real quick and sweet here. How does an attorney sleep? First, he lies on one side, and then he lies on the other. I know. Okay, sorry. This one's good. This one's good. Maybe. What do lawyers and sperm have in common? 1 in 3 million has a chance of becoming a human being. Okay, that's all. I'm sorry, and I didn't write those. All I stole them from somebody else. Anyway.
Well, what kind of underwear do lawyers wear?
What?
Briefs.
Oh, jeez.
Briefs.
Oh yeah, you had the lawyer dad jokes. Give us a couple lawyer dad jokes.
Oh, okay. I will. I think we'll end with those. But I found one lawyer joke that I actually don't think is offensive to lawyers, and I think it sort of highlights something that might be an attribute of a good lawyer, something that, Tim always impressed upon me very early in my career. So 2 lawyers go into this diner and they just get a couple of drinks. Okay. They each pull out a sandwich and they start eating these sandwiches that they brought in. And the owner of this diner gets really, really annoyed with this. And he goes over and he says, "Hey, you guys can't eat your own sandwiches in here." And the lawyers look at each other, shrug, switch sandwiches, and keep going. Right?
Not great. Not great, Pat.
Come on.
Well, did you guys hear about the time the woman sued the hotel for losing her luggage? No. Unfortunately, she lost the case.
Oh.
Sorry.
There you go.
That's not really a lawyer joke, but it's a law joke.
No, it's a good one. Okay. I think this is maybe the last sort of longer joke that I tell on this one, and then we'll do a couple groaners just to finish it off. Does that sound all right with you guys? So after years of hard work, Angie took her first vacation on a luxury cruise ship, and she's sitting there on the deck and she's having some sun, and she looks over and she sees a friend that she hasn't seen from her hometown, like way back in the school days. And she runs over and she says, "Hey, Angela, how are you? I haven't seen you in forever." And they say hello and they exchange things. And he says, "Geez, what are you doing these days?" And then Angela leans in and she says, "Listen, I'm a lawyer, but don't tell my mom. She thinks I'm a prostitute."
Yeah. That is a very versatile joke that I've heard.
It's a very versatile joke.
Tell about, the kid who wouldn't admit during father or whatever, telling the kids in school what their parents did. He stood up and said, "Yeah, my dad is actually, something terrible. He was a murderer or whatever." And then the teacher comes up to him later and says, "Well, Johnny, your father doesn't do that." He says, "But I couldn't bear to tell everybody he plays for the Edmonton Oilers."
Yeah. Yes, there you go. Yes.
That joke could be reworked any number of ways to suit the occasion. So
it can. Okay, well, I think we're coming up on time here. So a couple of groaners here just at the end. What do you call a priest who becomes a lawyer? Say it if you know it, Tim.
No, I know it. No.
It's a father-in-law.
Anyway.
Who invented copper wire? 2 tax attorneys fighting over a penny.
Okay.
What's a person?
That was originally not a lawyer joke. Okay, but I won't tell you what it was.
What is a personal injury lawyer's favorite dessert? It's a tort.
It's okay.
Did you hear about the new sushi bar that caters exclusively to lawyers?
No, Pat.
It's called Sosumi.
So sweet.
Okay, just stop. Just
I
stop.
actually looked that up, and Sosumi is not a Japanese word or anything.
Shocking.
But it is the name
that's-
of an error sound created by some Apple engineer in 1991 for the Macintosh. Anyway, why did the Scarecrow become a lawyer? Because he was outstanding in his field.
In his field. But, oh my gosh.
Okay. All right. Yeah, take your bow. You got to leave on a high note, like George Costanza says, right?
Ooh, Seinfeld number 2.
I just can't help myself. Well, yeah, as Pat noted, we are kind of coming up on time here. So, Tim, as our esteemed guest, an expert in storytelling and jokes, do you have any closing thoughts or closing remarks before we wrap things up?
No, just thanks for inviting me. And I think what you're doing here is very good. And I'll make a point of trying to, edify myself by watching the rest of your podcasts and learn things about the law that haven't stuck so far.
Okay. All right. Well, it was awesome having you, and Pat, you as well. You're one of my best buddies in the office. It was nice having you on here. Any comments from yourself before we take off?
No, thanks a lot, Tim, for coming. Always a pleasure to spend some time with you. And Kristen, thanks a lot for doing the podcast generally.
All right. Well, I hope everybody enjoyed this. We definitely went on with jokes a lot longer than we intended, as always. Hope to catch you on the next episode.
You've been tuning into the Lawyer Up with HMC podcast with your host, Kristen Hagg. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, hmclawyers.com. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others.